Martine Rothblatt is on our board of advisors and is also one of our benefactors. And I want to use this acknowledgement. She's at her son's graduation today, but will be here tomorrow. But I acknowledge her tonight as a teaser for tomorrow, because Martine is one of the very eclectic intellectuals that we've attracted at the I.H.E.U. She's written books such as, for instance, The Apartheid of Gender, which argues against legal recognition of gender under the law. She's become a leading light in transgender legal theory as a consequence. Then she wrote Unzipped Genes, which argued, among other things, that young men should have prophylactic vasectomies and have to get a license to become fathers, which I thought was a very provocative argument, worthy of the humanist movement, I'm sure. She's a principal in Sirius Radio and has done much to further the cause of telemedicine and access to telemedicine for the developing world. She's written a book about Middle Eastern peace called 2 Stars for Peace, and a book about xenotransplantation. So if you're interested in topics such as those, she'll be talking about transsexuality as a torchbearer for the kinds of freedom issues that we'll be talking about tomorrow. And I welcome you to join us tomorrow for all the other speakers as well.
Technological transsexualism as a torchbearer for technological self-determination. Let me just mention one very trivial thing, because some people will think about it. There's 2 ways to spell transsexualism. One with 2 S's in the middle and one with 1 S. And the way transsexuals themselves began to very first describe themselves in the 1960s and 70s was with 1 S. And when the first doctors began to write about this, a famous Dr. Money from Johns Hopkins, he described it as 2 S's. And this, so when people want to go with the medically standard way, they use 2 S's. And when people want to be transgressive, they use 1 S. I, being kind of a transgressive person, I use 1 S. So I'd like to talk about 3 things. First of all, what is technological transsexualism? What is technological self-determination? And to compare and contrast some of the similar challenges faced and see if we can learn anything or apply anything from technological transsexualism into technological self-determination, which is the next big advent in human development. Technological transsexualism involves changing from one gender to the other, and it can be more precisely defined as the use of products or processes to alter the phenotype from that generally associated with either male or female to its alternative. I just loved in the previous presentation the way it was described that so often women change themselves for their men's benefit, and I don't know if you can quite see all the wording in this ad, but it says, you know, husbands like Premarin too. Presumably not for themselves, but for their wives, unless they're closeted. It's very important to point out, I think, whenever discussing transsexualism, that Professor Ann Fausto-Sterling has published a lot of research showing that there are actually no absolute male or female sexual categories and no absolute male or female brains. So while there's a lot of confusion in public society that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, I think the better researched opinions show that there's actually a continuum of sexual identity and a continuum of gender. There are, of course, typical phenotypic characteristics associated with gender: body shape, body hair, reproductive organs, and whatnot. One key characteristic of transsexualism is that there's a very strong motivation for people to change, and we'll see this again with technological self-determination. Despite very high cost, painful surgery and recovery, extensive mental evaluation, risk of death, people will change. And I think we're going to see all these same 4 factors in technological self-determination having nothing to do with gender per se. A good thing is that laws are slowly changing toward recognizing the human rights of transsexuals. And the most recent change in this regard has been in the 6th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, where the court held specifically that a transsexual's human rights were violated by actions that were taken, and specifically that there is a federal law in the United States that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. And up until very recently, it was held very kind of illogically that ban on discrimination on the basis of sex did not apply to discrimination on the basis of someone changing their sex or being attracted to somebody of a different sex. It only applied to discrimination on the basis of one's sexual status as either a male or a female. But the Sixth Court has found that that was too narrow an interpretation, and the Sixth Circuit upheld discrimination on the basis of transsexualism as violative of that act. However, that's really just one circuit, and the UK, for example, is at odds with the European Union. The European Union has held that transsexuals should be granted a full set of rights, and including the right to a new legal identity and the right to marry. And unfortunately, other countries like the UK do not agree with that. The state of Florida does not agree with that. And hence, if a transsexual is not acknowledged in their chosen sexual identity, they can quite legally be deprived of a job, deprived of housing, deprived of travel, be not permitted to marry, not permitted to have a family. And the fact of the matter is most transsexuals in most parts of the world don't have any of those rights. But the good news is that we are beginning to gain some of those rights. And these things sometimes take time to change. Well, what can we see by comparison with technological transsexualism and technological self-determination? Let me first just give a few highlights on what I would call technological self-determination. I would say, very much like my definition of transsexualism, this is the use of scientifically derived products or processes to alter the phenotype of an individual from that which is genetically associated with Homo sapiens to something else. The example here is all kinds of wild contact lenses. That's not something, those color eyes are not coded for in our DNA, so that's an example of technological self-determination. We can look at lesser and greater stages of technological self-determination. I think there's this vast an array of stages of technological self-determination as there is of transgenderism. You can have people who are, very femme, very male, little butchy femme, little femi-male, and like a million gradations in between. And same with technological self-determination. Neuroelectronic interfaces, bionic ears, cochlear ear implants, contact lenses, bone replacement. What's really fascinating to me, though, are sort of the ultimate stages of technological self-determination, the ones that might be equivalent to full transsexual sex surgery going, all the way, which I would believe to be downloading your mind, dispensing with your body, and using virtual reality or nanobot swarms to assume any particular phenotype. I think that is the ultimate of technological self-determination. I love this cartoon from Transmetropolitan, which I think is a discontinued graphic book comic. But basically, what the lead character is saying here is that her boyfriend dumped her the night before because he's decided to kill himself. And the other character talking with her is saying, oh, come on, he didn't decide to kill himself. He's just downloaded his mind, and he's dispensed with his body, and he's living in virtual reality. It's going a long way to say that's killing himself. And she doesn't really care because she misses the touch and feel of the previous person. To, in fact, download your mind is to break all of your mental capabilities up into beams. And very much like one of the excellent questions asked earlier about comparisons between genetic pollution and mimetic pollution, we can look at beams as being something quite analogous to memes. And these are individual, irreducible elements of a person's mannerisms, personalities, recollections, feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and values. You might really say that you are very much more your beams than you are your genes, because somebody else who might look just like you could be a completely different person, like your identical twin. And I think ultimately, if push came to shove, and somebody asked you if you had cosmetic surgery, as just described, for example, are you the same person? Yes and no. I mean, it was well pointed out that you do change a bit, but you're fundamentally the same the same person. If you do begin to download your beams and then begin to interact with the world through electronic interfaces, instead of being a transsexual, you may become a transbeman. And the transbeman would be a person who transcends biological and electronic human boundaries. Now, it's not necessary to download all of yourself to become a transbeman. You could, for example, implant into your mind neuroelectronic interfaces, enhance your mind with memory chips, and you can imagine Alzheimer's patients who augment their memory with memory chips that are collected from earlier in their life, so they'll more rapidly recognize their loved ones and whatnot. Such an augmented Alzheimer's patient would be a transbeman. I would argue that Stephen Hawking is a transbeman. In fact, I would argue in many ways all of us are transbemans, because how horrible do you feel when your hard drive crashes and you lose all of your contacts, all of your photos, all of your favorite songs, all of your best videos, all of your calendar? I think we're all already transbemans. Ultimately, transbemanism is about replacing DNA-driven birth with BNA-driven birth, beam neural architecture, realizing what's really essential about us are our mannerisms, our personalities, our beliefs, attitudes, and values, and we can rebirth ourselves as transbemans, and in fact we can have offsprings who are also offsprings of our BNA rather than our DNA, blending of our beams with one or more other partners' beams to create new BNA-defined beings. Now, the socio-legal acceptance of technological self-determination, very much like the socio-legal acceptance of transsexuals, really varies inversely in proportion to your degree of genome abandonment. The more you abandon your genome, the more people are going to not accept who you are. I actually think that that there is a form of discrimination against technological self-determination that's very much equivalent to simply shooting and killing somebody, which is if an individual did download their entire essence into software, or for example, downloaded their entire essence into frozen neurons through cryonics, and then dispensed with the rest of their body, and claimed to still be alive and to interact with other people through the internet, through virtual reality, through iChat. Nobody anywhere in the world right now gives that virtual being any rights at all. In fact, as far as the world is concerned, that individual has been shot in the head and is dead. And yet, I may have all of my feelings, desires, wants in that computer, and I have no rights at all. I can travel faster than anybody through the world, but I have no rights because I'm a transbeman. How can we use the lessons of transsexuals to help self-determiners, technological self-determiners? One way is to medicalize technological self-determination. There's an organization called the Henry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association, in which people coined the phrase gender dysphoria. And they said, like, basically, if you feel that you're a woman in a man's body or a man in a woman's body, and you pretend to be the other gender for a year, then two psychologists will give you a letter that you can take to a cosmetic plastic surgeon, and they'll change your sex. And you can use that same letter to go to the passport office and get a passport in your new identity. You can, in fact, get an entirely new identity based on being the other gender for a year, pretending to be the other gender for a year, convincing two shrinks that you really want to be that other gender. You get a new legal identity. And what I'd like to propose is that we come up with something like gender dysphoria, but call it genodysphoria. And genodysphoria would be the ecstatic sense, genoeuphoria, which would be the patient-empowered term, would be the ecstatic sense of freedom one has in transcending their genome. Genodysphoria, the medical condition, would be feeling an acute sense of dissatisfaction with being in your own genome. There are a few examples of genodysphoria. I think all of us have genodysphoria to some extent or another, so all of us would be good candidates. There are certain benefits associated with medicalizing genodysphoria, whereas if you don't medicalize a condition, people tend to say that you're immoral, you're weak, you're crazy, you're self-destructive. As soon as you medicalize it, oh, okay, well, that's not your fault. You have an illness, and we can treat it. So there are certain benefits with adopting this rubric of genodysphoria. I think it's especially appropriate, in fact, given that the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. So if you are unhappy with your genome in any way, you are not healthy. You should have a medically defined illness. Since technological self-determination is by definition a quest for complete physical and mental well-being, it makes perfect sense for genodysphoria to be a recognized condition. What I'd like to end on is what's especially relevant for human rights. Jonathan Mann, who unfortunately we all lost from the living in the crash of United Airlines Flight 83 over Switzerland a few years ago, was a great HIV, public health, public human rights advocate, pointed out that the proposal that promoting and protecting human rights is inextricably linked to the challenge of promoting and protecting human health. And it derives from the fact that recognition that health and human rights are complementary approaches to the central problem of defining and advancing human well-being. So when we protect people's human health, we are protecting their human rights. And when we protect their human rights, we're protecting their human health. And I'd like to propose that the psychology community define genodysphoria, adopt diagnostic standards. If an individual is able to live as a cyber-conscious being, while they're still their male or female self, but have a cyber-conscious being for an entire year, that be an adequate basis to grant that cyber-conscious being an independent legal identity, just as a transsexual gets their own legal identity. Now, I don't believe that medicalization should be the only approach for technological self-determiners to get their human rights. Another approach is to expand our understanding of diversity and solidarity. And what this flow chart shows here is that we can also say, like, we'll expand our acceptance of diversity to include people who upload their mind and get rid of their body. And we'll include our definition of solidarity, that the whole society should support those people and pay for their transition as a trans beman. But until we are ready to expand our definitions of diversity and solidarity to support the financial costs of anybody who wants to be a technological self-determiner to be so, we should provide a medicalization path as a fallback option for society to cover the costs of technological self-determiners. In conclusion, both transsexuals and trans bemans have a visceral need to go beyond their DNA. I think all of us fill in that category. Psychologists can serve as protectors and gatekeepers for the necessary procedures, and society should pay for the necessary procedures because human rights and human health are social contract obligations. Thanks a lot.
Martine blows my mind, and that's not easy to do. Jonathan is another one of the I.H.E.'s fellows, and at Lutheran Pacific? California Lutheran University. California Lutheran University. You are